guilty for bearing false witness is that you are to be burned alive.
I will not be silent.
The exciting part of The Last Duel is that it is about a woman in 14th century France that was sexually assaulted and refused to stay silent. Nowadays, survivors are not supported. We don't have a support system set up for survivors. We do not have a system set up to take care of perpetrators. But back then, a public accusation of rape was a crime. And while I knew this on some level, I don't think I fully internalized the reality of what that meant. Before I dive into the video, there's two things I want to address. One, this is based on a true story, and I did do research on getting what actually happened and getting as much facts as possible. And I'm going to be sharing all of them today, which means I'm going to be spoiling the movie for you. Secondly, we are going to be talking about sexual assault and in some cases in a bit of detail. But what is The Last Duel about anyway? So the reason it's called The Last Duel is because in that time, when Parliament could not decide on a verdict regardless of the case, what they would do is they would say, all right, we're gonna have both sides fight each other. You're gonna go for a duel. And whoever wins is obviously right. Because God says that you're the right one because he kept you alive. Now, personally, as a believer myself, I still think this is absolutely ridiculous. I think God thinks this is absolutely ridiculous. But what this duel was fighting for the truth. The woman in question was named Marguerite de Carreau. I don't know. I'm probably butchering that. Now, before I dive into the details, I want to make this abundantly clear. Because Marguerite came forward with the rape accusation, had her husband not been on board to fight with her, she wouldn't have even been allowed to make a case. Why? Because she was a woman owned by men. But it gets even crazier. Let's say her husband fights the accused and they duel. Her husband dies. Because her husband dies, that proves that Marguerite was lying. So she would be burned alive as punishment for the false accusation. So what I shared previously was from Film School Rejects. What I'm about to share is an article that was written by Eric Jaeger. Here's the name. Hopefully I'm getting it right, or at least not too wrong. So it's January 1368. Marguerite tells her husband that she was raped by Jacques Legris. Her husband, Sir Jean de Carreau, again, it's so bad. Feel free to mock my accent in the comments. Her husband is furious, and Sir Jean de Carreau brought the case to court to get justice for his wife, and I'm sure his pride. But because the count in charge favored Legris, the accused, he said that Marguerite just must have dreamt it and then ordered that nothing more be said about it. Because of course, we as women don't understand our own bodies, right? There's no way that we would actually know the difference between a dreamed assault and an actual one. There'd be no physical signs whatsoever. Carreau was absolutely furious at this, as he should be, and he ended up making the trip to Paris to appeal the ruling with King Charles VI. Let me rewind for a second. There's something that was not even brought up during this case that played a massive part. Legris was known, quote, as a seducer or worse. So Legris was already known to be a ladies' man. And I'm assuming the or worse is a lot worse. So even though he had a history of being a womanizer, of claiming what wasn't his, she just must have dreamt it, which I'm sure only added to her husband's anger. That's really important to keep in mind. I think all facts are important, but unfortunately, while a woman is involved in this time, the facts weren't enough. But here's the deal. Sir Jean de Carreau went to Paris to go contest the ruling with King Charles VI. That's when he made mention of the duel. He evoked a 1306 royal decree based on ancient precedent that allowed the duel as a last resort for nobles involved in capital cases. But as Jaeger notes, duels at this time were extremely rare. So it is not something they were doing on a regular basis, which only intensifies the reality of what Sir Jean de Carreau was saying. This challenge led to an investigation by Parliament. Only if the Parliament was unable to reach a verdict, then they would continue on with the duel. Over the next several months, famous lawyers were hired, witnesses were summoned, and testimony was gathered. Marguerite herself, now pregnant, perhaps as a result of the rape, came to Paris and testified in great detail about the alleged attack by Legris and his accomplice. Adam Louvel is the accomplice. And according to Marguerite, what happened was she fought off Legris to such a point that he couldn't hold her down by himself. He then asked Louvel to come and help him hold her down while he proceeded to assault her. So there was a witness, there was someone else involved, and yet he played zero part within the case. Parliament didn't reach a decision, so the duel was scheduled for December 29th. And here's another part that really bothered me. So Legris before this had been a squire, which is the rank under knight, not a knight yet. A knight was a name of honor. It was something to be promoted to. Because they were not on equal footing, because Sir Jean de Carreau was a knight, Legris, was promoted to knighthood. So Legris, a known womanizer and known seducer and known or worser, gets a promotion because he assaulted someone. And just like we see in the movies, and just like we'll see in The Last Duel, the duel began on horseback before they eventually dismounted and fought with swords and daggers. Ultimately, Marguerite's husband won and her story was proven true. But here's the infuriating part. Historians are doing everything in their power, including ignoring evidence, to prove Marguerite's story wrong. Hundreds of years after the fact, male historians are still trying to disprove Marguerite's story. There are many different theories, none of which have any evidence to hold true to them. And before I continue, because I know that somebody in the comments is going to come at me and say this, there is a small chance that she made it up. The problem is the fact, in 99.9% of cases, we are skeptical of the victim and supportive of the abuser. Instead of helping the victim get justice, we are too busy making sure the abuser doesn't have a tainted reputation. We're too busy asking the victim 10,000 questions while letting the abuser go on with their life, which only teaches the abuser that they can get away with it. I wonder why so many repeat offenders exist. One of the really cool things about attorneys is that they write down everything. So Eric Jaeger was able to find the documentation that Legris' lawyer had when he was writing down and keeping notes for the case. His lawyer, Jean Lecoq, I think is how you pronounce it. He was a renowned lawyer, well-respected. He didn't even believe him. He was skeptical of his own client and was already struggling because he's like, this is just a thorny case of he said, she said, when essentially he was struggling to defend his own client. In the 6 centuries after the quarrel ended, however, the moral that was to be derived from it changed considerably. Many skeptics, including chroniclers, historians, partisans, and even historical novelists, have cast doubt on the official verdict. Some have echoed Count Pierre's dismissive decree, you know, the man that said she just dreamed it all up, saying that Marguerite made it all up, perhaps to cover up an affair with another man. Some have suggested that her husband forced the story out of her to avenge himself on Legris, his former friend turned rival at court. Because of course, a woman could never be right about what happens to her body. No way at all. And some, invoking the most popular theory, acknowledge the rape, but say that Marguerite mistakenly accused the wrong man, an honest but tragic error that robbed Legris of his life, fortune, and good name, because a seductive womanizer or worser has a good name. Even though many have tried really hard and are trying hard to disprove Marguerite's story, none of what they are saying is evidence-based. The evidence that we have points to her being correct. I love what Jaeger says in the following quote. It's strange that so many authorities seem to have been untroubled by the obvious factual errors in these reports, their mutual inconsistencies, or the lack of any corroborating evidence. I agree, because this makes me question everything that we learn. So there is a group, a large group of these novelists, of these historians that are purposely choosing to ignore the fact that there's no evidence to back up these stories, but they are preaching them as fact anyway. That, my friend, is terrifying. What else have we been taught that doesn't have any evidence? What else have we been taught that is just theory based off of angry men? Solid question. And here is another point that Yeager makes that none of these historians even want to talk about. And it's the fact that no, Parliament couldn't reach a decision based on the evidence, which there was plenty of it, but they believed her story enough to say that it was worth the duel. If they really believed that there was no credit to what she was saying, they would have dismissed it. Why? Because again, she was a woman. In these times, women were property. They were owned by their husbands. And the fact that a woman would speak up and disrupt the fragile bubble that they've had, why would they even allow the duel to take place if they didn't think that there was any credibility to her story? Marguerite's story must have seemed at least plausible to the magistrates who ordered the duel, something the Parliament had not done for over 30 years in a rape case. But yeah, there's no way. She must have got it wrong. Here's another quote from Yeager's article. The tangled and still controversial case leaves many tantalizing questions, not least of all why Jacques Legris did it, if indeed he did. This is where I want to pause for a second. This case is controversial because they're struggling to find why he would do this. Let's go back to the fact that he was already a well-known seducer and or worser. He was already a womanizer. He was already arrogant. He already thought that he had the right. Why did he do it? Because he wanted to. I'm not going to go into the deep story here, but Marguerite did share in detail what happened that afternoon. Essentially, her husband was away, so she was staying at her mother-in-law's house. Her mother-in-law ended up leaving for some time to go take care of some business, so she was there alone. Adam Louvel showed up and tried to talk up Legris and get her to want to see him. She wanted nothing to do with him, especially because her husband didn't like him. She said, no, thank you. That's when Legris randomly showed up and just entered her house. What happened next? He grabbed her hand. He forced her to sit down next to him. He tried to get all up on her. She said, no, don't talk to me that way. He got upset that he was rejected because how dare she? She should have been nicer about it. She could have been more polite. She could have accepted his advances. She could have just, does this sound familiar yet? Why are we still trying to find out why these crimes happen? These crimes happen because men are taught that they are entitled to a woman's affection and body. Men are taught to chase after sex like it's a trophy. Women are taught that sex is a chore, that we just have to take it. We are taught that it is no big deal and we should just get it over with so it shouldn't be worse, with no regard to the fact that this is the most vulnerable position a woman will ever be in, without taking into consideration the fact a body part is literally entering inside of another one against one's will. Why does this happen? Because men believe that they can. And I am aware that women can do it too. We have friends who are men and some who are women who are sexually assaulted by women. And this is the exact same story that gives them the right. They feel entitled and they feel like they can get away with it. Why? Because no one's going to believe that a woman did it. No one's going to believe that a woman could do that. Once again, bidding on the victim while letting the abuser continue on. Men think they can, so they do. It really is not much deeper than that. Let's get back to the quote. If the Parliament of Paris could not establish even the basic facts, there's little chance of our discovering hidden motives all of these centuries later. But the doubts greeting Marguerite's scandalous story, the initial rejection of her claims in court, and the shadow cast over her reputation by the later chronicle accounts are not so different from the skepticism and prejudice faced by more recent victims of sexual assault. Much as Legris is said to have silenced Marguerite with his hood, a legion of clerics, historians, and partisans managed to muffle and stifle her story with vague rumors and inconsistent reports that have shrouded the matter almost to the present day. I wish I could thank Ben Affleck and Matt Damon personally for choosing to take on this project. I watched an interview with them and they did not mean to make a statement. They just wanted to share a story. That is the power that comes with sharing a story. Because what I guarantee you will happen from this powerful woman being showcased, she is going to give permission centuries later to millions of women all over the world. Her voice will ring in the ears of many. Women will want to speak up and share their stories, and the men will show up to silence them. But when we make heroes out of those who don't back down, that gives so much permission to those of us who have experienced it personally. After doing some digging, it does look like they showcase what leads up to the assault. So if that may trigger you, I would not recommend watching this movie. At the very least, maybe let a friend watch it first and let them tell you if it's something that you can handle. But what I can say is that this movie is going to change lives. This movie is going to impact the world in ways that they didn't even realize. Thank you to Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for showcasing such a powerful woman. You are giving more freedom than you even realize. I'm going to do a follow-up video after I see the movie. If you want to see the follow-up video, please make sure to hit subscribe. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and never forget that you are strong, you are capable, you are intelligent, and boo, you are so freaking worthy.